Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Benjamin, and welcome back to our series on the political history of the United States, or just the history of the United States in general. And today we're talking about the Articles of Confederation and Perpetual Union, because that's technically the official title, is the Articles of Confederation and Perpetual Union. But most people know them as the Articles of Confederation. Um, and unfortunately, they were actually generally seen as weak, ineffective, and some will even say terrible. And there's a lot of reasons for that. We'll kind of go over, and I do have some notes written down on my phone here, so I'm actually going to keep those up. Let me pull those up. Oh, shut up, Facebook. And these were kind of already determined, or at least um, in discussion, some form of cooperation or confederation between what would eventually become the United States. These were in discussion uh, as early as 1754 with Benjamin Franklin's Albany Plan. Um, and you're going to find out that the Articles of Confederation are very similar to how the Haudenosaunee Confederation, the Iroquois Confederation, actually worked, and their government actually worked. But during the American Revolution, in order to be seen as a legitimate uh, political entity, the founders realized and recognized that they needed to have what would appear to be a legitimate government. They needed to declare themselves as independent, and they needed to be able to follow the custom of nations rather than be viewed by foreign powers as rebels and traitors to a legitimately powerful monarch or government. So, of course, the Declaration was drafted, a ideal treaty, a treaty that was designed to be viewed as proper and the form of how American treaties and foreign diplomatic relations would actually be, was drafted, as well as the Articles of Confederation, which went through numerous iterations. Um, and actually, the Continental Congress very quickly was operating under these, even though they hadn't been ratified. However, they were officially declared in 1777, but they didn't get every state to sign on until 1781. Maryland being the last holdout. 12 states had actually ratified the Articles by February of 1779. However, Maryland, they were concerned about claims to Western territory being held on by very large states such as Virginia, New York, and Pennsylvania. Maryland wanted to make sure that they would actually drop those claims in accordance with the rules of the Articles of Confederation. Um, Now, the basic principle is the first article there of 13. Yes, 13 articles. The first one established the name of the Confederation, or what would eventually become the name of the country, the United States of America. It asserted, the second article asserts the sovereignty of each state with specific delegated powers to the Confederation government. Um, And it's stated, each state, and I'll quote it directly, each state retains its sovereignty, freedom, and independence, and every power, jurisdiction, and right which is not by this confederation expressly delegated. So that basically means if it isn't written in here, the national government doesn't have this power. And you'll actually, when we get to the U.S. Constitution, specifically the Bill of Rights, we're actually going to see that phrase come up again. And we're also going to have a few discussions about certain amendments and certain language usage of the time. And I will put a disclaimer in that video as to why I'm doing that. So, the purpose is declared in the third article. A little bit weird to not declare the purpose immediately, but okay, fine. Basically, it's to unify but maintain as much sovereignty as possible. Article 4 elaborates on the intent. To secure and perpetuate mutual friendship and intercourse among the people of different states in this union, and to establish, and it says establish equal treatment and freedom of movement for the free inhabitants of each state, to pass unhindered between the states, excluding paupers, vagabonds, and fugitives from justice. Basically, it establishes extradition, which basically every state in the Confederation had to abide by. So you couldn't hide from justice by just going to a different state. Article 5 describes how the Congress of the Articles of Confederation would work, or the Congress of the Confederation. Each state was allowed one vote, and each delegation was between 2 and 7 members. And the members of Congress are to be appointed by the state legislatures, and no congressman may serve more than 3 out of any 6-year period. Or I believe that may have been rolling. Not entirely positive about that. And I can't figure out whether or not it was rolling or just 6-year blocks, and you can only serve 3, so you could wind up serving, say, 4 or 5 or maybe even 6 years straight. But I would think it would be rolling. Article 6 basically talks about foreign relations. Only the central government may declare war or conduct foreign political or commercial relations. No state or official may accept any foreign gifts or titles, and the granting of any title of nobility is forbidden to all. No states may form subnational groups, such as various interstate compacts. We'll talk about whether or not this matters in the future, but we'll see about that. No state may tax or interfere with treaty stipulations already proposed. No state may wage war without permission of Congress unless invaded or under imminent attack on the frontier. No state may maintain in peacetime a standing army or navy unless infested by pirates. But every state is required to keep ready a well-trained, disciplined, and equipped militia. We'll talk about how this evolved at some further juncture, but this is probably the origin of what we would come to describe as the Second Amendment. And we'll talk about some of the documents that actually influence certain, how the U.S. Constitution wound up taking form. And the other thing about that is that it actually requires it. So you could say this is kind of basically saying that we need a National Guard of some sort. And notice that it says well-equipped, disciplined, and equipped. Well-trained, disciplined, and equipped militia. This will evolve into the term well-regulated. But I think here it's a little bit more clear as to what they would mean by well-regulated. And notice that part, well-equipped. Article 7 basically says the state legislatures will cover military ranks from colonel and below whenever an army is raised for common defense. Article 8 talks about finances and expenditures of the United States of America will be paid with funds raised by the state legislatures and apportioned to the states in proportion to the real property values of each. Basically the Articles of Confederation said the central government cannot tax. God, I love that article. 9. Powers and functions of the United States Congress the powers and functions of the United States in Congress assembled grants the United States in Congress assembled the sole and exclusive right and power to determine peace and war, exchange ambassadors, to enter into treaties and alliances, with some provisos, to establish rules for deciding all cases of captures or prizes on land or water, to grant letters of marque and reprisal. Basically, a letter of marque and reprisal is federal government giving permission to conduct piracy, also known as privateering. In time of peace, to appoint courts for the trial of pirates and crimes committed on the high seas, to establish courts of appeals in all cases of capture, but no member of Congress may be appointed a judge, to set weights and measures, including coins, and for Congress to serve as final court for disputes between the states. The court will be comprised jointly appointed commissioners, or Congress shall appoint them. Each commissioner is bound by oath to be impartial. The court's decision is final. Congress shall regulate the post offices, appoint officers, blah, 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 and regulate in armed forces. The United States Congress assembled may appoint a president who shall serve no longer than 1 year per 3-year term of the Congress. Congress may request requisitions from the states in proportion with their population or take credit. Congress may not declare war, enter into treaties or alliances, appropriate money, or appoint a commander-in-chief. Without 9 states assenting, Congress shall keep a journal of proceedings and adjourn for periods not to exceed 6 months. Article 10. When Congress is in recess, any of the powers of Congress may be executed by the Committee of the States or any 9 of them, except for those powers of Congress which require 9 states in Congress to execute. 11. If Canada, which historians and most people at the time were specifically referring to the province of Quebec, or as Americans would call it, Quebec, if Canada accedes to this confederation, it will be admitted. No other colony could be admitted without the consent of at least 9 states. 12 affirms that the confederation will honor all bills of credit incurred, monies borrowed, and debts contracted by Congress before the existence of the Articles and before ratification, I would assume. 13, it declares that the Articles shall be perpetual and may only be altered with the approval of Congress and the ratification of all the state legislatures. Basically, this is a part that requires unanimity. A lot of important decisions in the Articles of Confederation required unanimity because they wanted to make sure that any decision undertaken that would affect more than 1 or 2 member states, or potentially all, of the states was going to have the approval of everyone. And this runs into the problem of the old saying, you can please all of the people some of the time, or some of the people all the time, but you will never please all of the people all of the time. And this is why the articles are typically viewed as pretty weak. And you can use Shays' Rebellion as an example, just from my notes. And I'm not really going to talk too much about Shays' Rebellion, nor one of my favorite rebellions, the Whiskey Rebellion. The reason why is because they're not... I think they're overhyped by historians, in my opinion. Shays' Rebellion probably wasn't going to lead to anything. It was just a bunch of disgruntled farmers in Massachusetts who were pissed at their state government. And, gee, I wonder why people from rural western Massachusetts would be pissed at Boston for determining everything about that state. There is no way I could ever see that being a thing. And I probably will bring up the Whiskey Rebellion, but not really in any sort of long discussion. So, without the power to tax, Congress really couldn't pay their debts. I will sometimes be very angry at taxation, but at the same time, I also understand that there is a limited need for taxation. You do have to actually pay for things, even if you are a government. You can't just say, oh, no, we have the money. I swear we have the money. We're just going to write a blank check to our citizens. No. We have the money to pay for it, I swear. You can't just live off of debt. If I have to balance my checkbook, so does the government. Okay? Now, part of that means you should cut expenses first. And you need to be making arguments of why you don't need something rather than, oh, we need this program. Well, do you? Look for reasons why you don't need something. That way you can cut it easier. But I'm kind of ranting at this point. States would be asked for troops in the event of a war, but oftentimes the state said, no, you don't really actually need that, Congress. This was a very states' rights-oriented document, and it was very much oriented in the idea of decentralization, because that was the problem that led to the American Revolution. They were concerned, and rightfully so, given their own personal experience, that an overly centralized government would be bad for the nation. Now, a lot of historians say they went too far in the other direction and went too decentralized. And that this government would never work. But work is a very vague definition. Many would say, well, it just wouldn't last. Well, if pressed by that. And I would actually beg to disagree. I'll beg to differ on this. And point to the one example of a horrifically disorganized government and horrifically decentralized government managing to survive for 1,000 years. And that was the Holy Roman Empire, which was, as Voltaire said, neither holy nor Roman nor an empire. Now, was it a bit unwieldy? Yeah. But it did lead to more stability than instability in the middle of North Central Europe. Yeah, it had its problems. And yes, a centralized Germany under the, when I say a centralized and unified Germany, technically that was Prussia, but we'll call it Germany. Yes, it was definitely stronger and much more focused, but calling the Holy Roman Empire insignificant, weak, or not able to last is just patently false. And I don't see a reason why the American colonies or the American states by this point wouldn't fare in much the similar way as the Holy Roman Empire. Just instead of Schnitzel and Pfefferwurst, we have fried chicken and clam chowder. And the reason why I think it still would have maybe not succeeded to the way the U.S. has under the Constitution, but still would have been a long-lasting nation is because of the uniqueness of the American continent. The fact that once the U.S. was established from the coast to the Appalachians, that would actually form, the east coast to the Appalachian Mountains. That would form a relatively stable nation to begin with because you have strong natural features anchoring the nation's borders. And, of course, you have the U.S. Intercoastal Waterway, this long string of barrier islands, which would make internal trade very easy. You'd be able to get manufactured goods from New England down south in exchange for agricultural goods from the south up north. Of course, you extend that all the way, those borders all the way to Mississippi, another very strong natural boundary. And yes, it also works there because now you've got a lot of very good farmland. And let's not forget some of the other things such as coal and steel, or, well, it's iron because you have to mix coal, you have to mix carbon into the steel or into the iron to get steel. But that would form a very good nation as well. And the Mississippi is a great navigable river. It's navigable all the way up to, I think, Minnesota. But then, all of a sudden, you push that boundary all the way to the Rockies, which happened very quickly. Again, another defensible feature. The Rockies with the Red River bounding the southern border of all that. And you've got most of the Great Plains. Again, great agricultural heartland. And of course, you have strong borders there. And I could discuss the geography for a while, but I think we're getting a little bit too in depth. The point is that with a strong similar culture, I don't think the articles were as bad as some historians and definitely most history books and teachers paint them to be. Were they perfect? No. And was a rewrite necessary? Yes. I will agree with that. But they weren't as bad as people want to claim or say. There were some very good things, and a lot of the people who argued that the eventual Constitution was not perfect and needed a rewrite or a redraft or a few edits, they turned out to be more correct than I think most people realize. But we'll talk about that after we talk about the Constitutional Convention next episode. So take it easy, all. Have a very nice day. A like, a comment, and a subscription is really helpful, and I greatly appreciate it. And I hope we all have a very nice evening. Take it easy. Bye-bye.